When you work with only a few colors to make your paintings, we call that working with a limited palette. So a limited palette isn't that you have a very tiny palette, but it is that you have only a few colors on your palette that you use every time. And working with a limited palette has some benefits. The first benefit, of course, is your bank account, because you can go to the shop and buy all the colors that you see, but that will harm your bank account a little bit, of course. And, of course, when you work with only a small selection of color, you get to know what they do when you mix them together. That way you build confidence. For instance, when you're working on a painting and the first day you paint in the sky and the next day you want to go over it again with the same colors, it's easy to remember which colors you use. Let's start with the most basic limited palette that I can think of, and that is black and white only. And that may sound boring or strange or something, but with only black and white, of course, you can paint everything you want. The only thing lacking then is color, of course. Especially when you are a beginner in painting, it's difficult enough. You have to get used to the painting process itself and sketching and all that kind of stuff and how to prime your canvas. Then it might be a good idea to just start for a while with only black and white paint, and you can make a wide variety of nice paintings. When I switch this camera to black and white, you can see me as good as before, only without the colors. And that doesn't matter that much. And most important part of painting is getting tonal values right, and you can study that very good with only black and white paint. Another example of a limited palette would be using only 3 primaries. That's also very useful when you are completely new to color mixing, because with yellow, magenta and cyan you can mix all other colors. In addition to these 3 colors, you can also buy black and white paint, of course. A benefit is that you learn to color mix, you understand the relations of the colors. The downside is that these colors aren't very practical when you use them daily. Then my favorite limited palette, titanium white, oxide black or another kind of black. Then for yellow you can buy primary yellow or a cadmium yellow light. Another substitute could be azo yellow light, for instance. Pyrrole red, ultramarine blue, last but not least, burnt umber. Where are you, burnt umber? Here's burnt umber. These colors are great for almost everything you want to paint. There can be only one problem, and that is when you want to mix very vivid greens. Then you cannot do that, because with an ultramarine blue and this kind of yellow you get a little bit of a grayed down green as a mixture. And that is because this blue already contains a little bit of magenta, and magenta is a complementary color of green, so that destroys the green a little bit. So if you encounter very vivid greens or very neutral blues, then I would recommend, in addition, you could also buy cyan, primary cyan. That is a very neutral blue, and you can use it to make very bright greens, for instance, in combination with this yellow. Or instead of cyan, you could also buy phthalo blue. Phthalo blue is in fact the same thing as cyan, because in cyan they have added titanium white to make it a little bit lighter. So what you see here is a lighter version of this color. You can hardly believe that, but it is a fact. And with this palette as well, you can make very nice dark colors with ultramarine and burnt umber. When you mix them together, then you get a very dark color. And you can balance that color more towards blue or more towards brown, burnt umber, so warmer or cooler. And also you can easily make very nice grays with these 2 colors, because you can add a little titanium white to the mixture, and then you can choose if you want to balance the gray a little bit more towards blue, towards ultramarine, so you add more ultramarine, then the gray gets cooler. And if you want a warmer gray, you just add more of the burnt umber. A neutral gray you can make as well, of course, then you balance it out a little bit more precisely in between. So, black and white, of course, you can use for black and white studies and to make your paint lighter. And of course, when you get a little bit experienced, when you have used them a lot, these colors, then you can add new colors to your palette once in a while to try them out. So for instance, if you want more of an orangey color, You can buy vermilion, it's just an example, or yellow ochre can be handy sometimes, or burnt sienna for instance. But it's always nice to start simple. My personal experience, I struggled with color mixing for a long time in my life. Using only a few colors helped me a lot. I got to understand color mixing much better. And I've used this palette for a long time. Nowadays I use all kinds of colors to have some shortcuts. And also you have of course different kind of pigments, because primary yellow you can also buy cadmium yellow light for instance. And cadmium yellow light is a very expensive pigment, but it is very opaque. So if I want to paint with yellow on a black background for instance, the regular yellows like primary yellow will not cover that well. So then you need several layers, and then it's handy to have cadmium yellow for instance. Every pigment has its own kind of special characteristics. But that's what you discover when you keep on adding new colors after a while. Thanks for watching, see you next time.